Okay, you budding art students, if some of you are looking for a method, a technique for doing portraiture, I actually have a formula. You know, formulas are dangerous because you can get stuck in a rut and and stop growing. But on the other hand, formulas are good guidelines, a good place to start when you don't know what else to do. So here's my formula, and it applies not only to portraiture but to all different kinds of painting, especially those of you who are trying to do old masters or realistic representational painting. It's very simple. Mid-tone, dark, light, in that order. What that means is you put down over a fairly large area, whatever area you're working on, a mid-range tone. Then you come back and do your dark details. Then you come back last and do your light details. If you try to do this in a different order, it doesn't work nearly as well. And this is especially useful for portraiture. Now, let me show you how I do it on BG's face. Here we go. I've mixed up an oil paint with a lot of medium. My favorite medium is Liquin because it makes the paint transparent, it makes it dry fast, and it makes it dry glossy. All three of those I like. There are other mediums out there. Give them all a try. Figure out which one you like. And as you can see, I'm applying it over the entirety of BG's face. Now, here's one of the reasons I like this acrylic underneath, oil on top technique. What happens if I put that on and I just don't like it? Good news, I take a clean rag, I wipe it all off, absolutely no harm done. I'm right back to the acrylic underpainting. But it just so happened I did like the color that was on there, so I'm going to put it back on there twice. This is mid-tone, got it? And here's why I like to finish my paintings in oil, because you have time to work with them. There, so his whole face is slightly wet. Now I come back with dark details. I should mention that all of the paints, almost all the painting I'm doing in oil on top of my acrylics is neither opaque nor transparent, but right in between, which is, you got it, translucent. That is very, very important. And I'm assuming that you understand the difference between opaque, transparent, translucent. If you don't, take a minute, meditate on it, figure it out. Translucent means you can see through it somewhat, like a frosted window pane. Sounds like a Christmas song. So I'm not losing all the work that I did initially underneath. Now, here's something else I'm going to do. I'm doing dark details, but I'm also doing slight adjustments in color. And I feel like his cheek ought to be slightly redder right in that area. So I'm going to go back and get some slightly redder oil paint mixed in with what I'm doing here, and come back and hit that area again. Let me see if I like the color that I've got here. I don't want to mislead you now. The portrait that I'm doing here today is fairly small, as you can see. His face is about 1 3/4 inches tall, perhaps. That's a pretty small portrait. So my feeling is I don't have a lot of room to do a lot of creative color things. Like a lot of people love to put, all wild and different colors very subtly in their portrait. I like to do that too. But on a portrait this size, I just think I'm asking for trouble. But when I talk about this 3-step formula, mid-tone over the whole thing, dark details, light details. When I talk about that formula, it does not mean necessarily that you always paint in a fairly muted palette or natural palette like I'm doing right here. I don't want to be misleading. My portrait that I'm doing here today, as you can see, is quite small. That means there's not a lot of room for creative color and so forth like we often like to put in our portraits. But that technique of mid-tone, dark detail, light detail is not limited to just this limited palette, a rather subdued and realistic palette. It also applies to like what I would call my old master's style of portraiture, where the underpainting is greenish gray. I also do mid-tone, dark, light formula on those paintings as well. Okay, I'm going to go to a smaller brush and do even finer dark details. Believe it or not, I can still barely see my original pencil drawing lines. Remember my homemade carbon paper lines on this canvas, which really helps me a great deal. As long as I can see them, I know I'm not messing up my drawing. Here's another good tip when you're doing portraits. What color do you do the hair? It's a good idea to use the same colors in the hair, generally speaking, that you do in the flesh tone. So don't paint all the hair, all the flesh tone, and then change all your colors and paint the hair. Use the same, like this, use the same stuff that's on your brush for the flesh tone to work in the dark hair or light hair. Same thing, even more so for light hair. Okay, now I'm going to come back with some light highlights. And just the way I did the darks, I did a medium dark detail first, and then came back and did darker darks. So with the highlights, I do medium highlights first, and then come back and do higher highlights, lighter highlights. Again, that's pretty universal technique if you're wondering how to paint a sky, clouds in the sky, if you're wondering how to paint foliage on trees and bushes, if you're wondering how to paint a distant mountain. This formula works for all of those. Mid-tone, kind of a mid-tone wash, dark detail, light detail. Of course, it does not apply to watercolor. We'll talk about that when we're doing watercolor. Lighter highlights again. I think this will be my final pass, at least for today. I'll take a look at all of this when it dries, see if I like it, and I can make easy changes after it's dry. And that's the end of this portrait demonstration. I'm sorry I don't have video showing me doing the rest of the painting, but it's basically everything that you just saw me do, except in a looser manner. Thanks so much for watching. Let me hear from you.